A lot of Met fans are going to be expecting Steve Cohen to open up his pockets. He did it last year. He spent over, I would say, about $500-600 million in the offseason, bringing in Lindor, some of the relief pitchers in May, and everybody thought that the Mets were a playoff-bound team with some of the acquisitions that they made in the offseason. And starting in the beginning of the season, they slowly but surely took over the National League East. They were the best team in the National League East. As the season progressed, they fell apart. They couldn't hit. Francisco Lindor couldn't hit. And then the trade deadline came and it went. And all they could bring in is Javier Baez. Now, going into the offseason, the Mets are going to have to make decisions with Javier Baez. Obviously, are they going to re-sign him? Are they going to pay him the $190 million that he's going to be asking for? Are they going to bring in Michael Conforto, which obviously the other day, as the last home game for the New York Mets came and went, and the Met fans were cheering Michael Conforto on, and then Michael Conforto after the game talking to the press and crying to the press, stating that he wants to come back and he wants to be a New York Met. He wants to be a Met for the rest of his career. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think the Mets are going to move away from Michael Conforto. He has really not produced over the last couple of years when they expected him this year to be a breakout player. So you're a Met fan, Speedy. What do you think of the whole Michael Conforto situation? And what do the Mets need to do in the offseason to make this team a playoff-bound team?
Michael Conforto, number one, you're not a crying legend like Wilmer Flores was. But again,
that's not saying much.
Hey, sparked a turnaround for a World Series run. I'll take it. But yeah, Michael Conforto, again, the emotion with your teammates. I know you're close to the organization. That's fine. But in terms of you as a player, good riddance. This was your year to prove it, and you actually got worse. The biggest problem with Conforto in the past was he was always just streaky. He had his bunches where he could hit at times, and then all of a sudden, then he'd fall off. Now his bunches were mainly a week, if any. His season was terrible this year, barely hit over the Mendoza line for much of the season. Then he's barely over 220. Yeah, lefties are hard to find. I understand that. It's not like you got better defensively. It's not like you got better in terms of on-base percentage or anything like that. So good riddance. Corner outfielders are easier to find. The Mets should have more depth on their roster, you would think, than they do to at least maneuver certain guys in the outfield. And they're going to have a lot of those types of decisions to make. But when it comes to you, when it comes to Dominic Smith, when it comes to J.D. Davis, guys like that are in these arbitration years where they could take qualifying offers, I'd much rather have Dominic Smith than you right now, even though he had a down year too, just because of his defense, because of his power being overall just much better.
He's cheaper.
Much cheaper. Good riddance to Conforto. Everyone says, oh, he's going to spark somewhere else because he's not on the Mets. Yeah,
I don't want to hear any of the Yankee fans thinking that that's where he's going, because he's not. The Yankee fans, I know, would love to steal Michael Conforto away from the Mets. He is not going to the Yankees. The Yankees don't need another corner outfielder. That's for damn sure.
And nor should the Yankees want that kind of thing. The Yankees, between the depth that they have between players that are merging, they're not going to need Michael Conforto. He'll still get maybe a starting job. He's not going to start anywhere significant. He's not going to get as much money as he thinks he's going to get off this kind of year either. I know that he's had his spurts of good, but that's really been it throughout his career. He hasn't really progressed to being an overall developmental player that the Mets thought he was going to be. Now, he wasn't a big prospect, but he still was at least a legitimate one where you would think, all right, where is that next step coming? And he hasn't done that. So at this point, he is what he is. So a team's going to just take a chance on him as maybe just a third outfielder, a 6-7 hitter, if anything.
I think when you look at the New York Mets and where the New York Mets are, they're going to have to figure out who is going to be here for the long run. We all know that Lindor is, because he just got that 11, 12-year contract. But who else? So where do the Mets go in the offseason in free agency? Do they bring in a power bat? Do they bring in bats that can actually hit for average? This has been a huge problem for the New York Mets. And Lindor, who was batting .222 all season long, he's going to have to produce better next year. This bullpen, which they spent a lot of money in the last 2 years in free agency, they need to rebuild this bullpen. They need to start pitching better. And what are they going to do with Noah Syndergaard? Is Noah Syndergaard coming back? Are they going to re-sign him or give him his extension, or are they going to let him go? We have to find out what's going on with Jacob deGrom. Is Jacob deGrom 100% with the shoulder problems that he was having at the end of the season? So there's so many thoughts and what ifs where the Mets are going to go in the offseason going in this year. I'm questioning where the Mets are going and what they are as a team, as an organization moving forward. And the only person that could be able to answer that is Sandy Alderson. And who is the GM of this team? Let's figure it out, because they had 2 GMs this year. They're the first team in MLB history that really had 3 GMs on one roster. And we don't even know if any of them are going to be a part of the organization next year. So it's crazy. I know the Met fans want to see this team actually win and make the playoffs and be consistent like the Yankees are, but there's still still a team that needs to figure out who their identity is, and I don't know if they know who they are.
Before we move on to the Yankees, I just want to reiterate this again. You know your organization is bad when of the last 3 general managers you've had, Brodie Van Wagenen is the most stable.
No, that's not saying much, and Brodie's back as, I guess, an agent. He's doing pretty well. He's got his players, and I felt bad for Brodie Van Wagenen and what they did to him, bringing back Sandy Alderson, because Brodie Van Wagenen, his drafts were pretty good. We got to see what those draft picks are going to be in the future, but so far so good for Brodie Van Wagenen when it came to the draft. His free agency and the money that the Mets were offering, aka the Wilpons, his free agency market and what he brought in wasn't things that really stood out, and that's why he doesn't have a job anymore. So Steve Cohen, he has the money. He's got the deep pockets. I expect him to open up his pockets again this offseason. The question is he going to make the right moves to get this team into the promise to the fans that they're going to be a playoff-bound team year in and year out like the Yankees? As far as the Yankees are concerned, the Yankees have played very good baseball. They went on that little trip. They swept the Red Sox. They almost swept the Blue Jays. They won 6 out of 7 games against the Red Sox and the Blue Jays. Going into last night, they were 2 games ahead in the wild card race. Now losing that game last night against the Tampa Bay Rays, and the Rays made a lot of mistakes at the end of the game and could have lost that game. Very much could have lost that game, but the Rays squeaked and won that game. I look at the Yankees. They need to win these last 2 games. They absolutely have to find a way to win these next 2 games, because the way Seattle is playing, the dominance of the way they're playing, you still have the Red Sox, you still have the Blue Jays, and the Yankees, they're playing the hardest team in baseball. And the Rays aren't sitting players out. They want to win this series. They want to knock the Yankees out. So the Yankees are going to have to win at least both these games to get into this wild card spot. The way these games are set up, you have the Boston Red Sox, they have the Nationals, you have the Blue Jays, they have the Baltimore Orioles. They're all easy teams, the teams that are beatable. The Yankees have the Rays, they have the best record in the American League, and they're not sitting players out. Nelson Cruz hit another dinger last night. It's just crazy how old Nelson Cruz is. He's in his 40s. He's the oldest player to hit over 30 home runs. It's just crazy, Speedy, absolutely crazy. And Gerrit Cole, if you need to play Gerrit Cole in the final game of the season, then you do that, even if you can't use him in the wild card game. It's crazy. The Yankees have positioned themselves in a position to hopefully get into the playoffs, but maybe even fail.
But the head-to-head wins is definitely what's positioning them well, not only in terms of a tiebreaker, but in terms of being able to put Gerrit Cole now in that wild card game. So if they do end up winning tonight and the Red Sox lose, they in essence clinch. So now obviously if the Red Sox win or both of them lose, then it's a lot tougher. But even if one of the other teams loses too, if Toronto loses, if Seattle loses, which they lost yesterday against the Angels, then the Yankees have a little more leeway to do that. And that's obviously the ideal plan. You want to have Gerrit Cole for that wild card game. But again, it could be harder if the worst case scenario happens for the Yankees today, which it very much could. The Red Sox playing against the Nationals, the Blue Jays playing against the Orioles, the teams are easier that they'll have to face. Now, obviously, if one of them loses, if both of them lose from the Blue Jays and Mariners, that obviously makes a difference too. Or if the Red Sox lose, and even if they win or some other scenario of that sort happens, they have the leeway to do that, because that's definitely the ideal scenario, especially with the way the Yankees bullpen has been this year, very shaky. You want somebody with length that can go in that kind of game. Now, in terms of the strategy for right now, the Yankees are definitely still going to have to space out their bullpen a lot better. Aaron Boone rested a lot of the top guys yesterday, so maybe they're more available today. I wonder if that was part of the strategy that he had in mind because they had the leeway of having the 2-game lead on the Red Sox, because the Red Sox lost 2 games against the Orioles, so that's not ideal for them. But they beat the Nationals yesterday, and you would think they would at least take one more game from the Nationals. So it'll be interesting to see how they game plan for tonight's game and tomorrow, depending on the scenarios.
If the Yankees win tonight, I think they clinch. I think the Yankees are going to clinch no matter what. If you look at Seattle, you look at the Blue Jays, I think that if the Yankees win today, and even if the Red Sox win today, I think the Yankees are going to clinch a playoff spot. I don't know if they're going to clinch the number 1 wild card spot, but I don't think the Yankees care if they're playing away or they're playing at home for the wild card game. As long as they have Gerrit Cole on the mound for that particular game, who gives them the best chance to win. You think with all the money that the Yankees have spend with Gerrit Cole and bringing in some of these players, they brought in Gallo, they brought in Rizzo. These guys are playoff-bound players. Rizzo is a playoff player. Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, 3 players that have gotten really, really hot in the last couple of weeks. So I expect them getting into the playoffs and going into the playoffs to get even hotter. So the Yankees are a team that is expected to make a run. Now, The question is Aaron Boone going to put them in position to succeed? Now, a lot of Yankee fans don't like Aaron Boone, a.k.a. Tyler Harrison, taking shots at Aaron Boone week in and week out, that he makes these mistakes in his bullpen decisions. But Luis Severino being in that bullpen absolutely puts the Yankees in position to succeed, especially long relief. I expect to see a lot of Luis Severino if the Yankees go far into the playoffs, maybe even start sometime in the playoffs if they need be. So I think that the Yankees have positioned themselves very, very well. They've played very good baseball. They've been one of the best teams in baseball for the last 3 or 4 weeks, even Seattle. And I expected Seattle to squeak into the playoffs, knock off the Blue Jays and the Red Sox, and I thought Seattle was going to be the other wild card team the way they've played. They won 11 games in a row before losing against the Angels the other day. So I think that when we talk about the Yankees need to keep providing offensively. They can't fall behind against teams like the Rays. And the Rays, they're a good young team. They have some good young players. But the Rays made a lot of mistakes early in the game and late in the game yesterday, which could have gave the Yankees an opportunity to put more points on the board. They gave up 3 runs in 8.5 innings, and it caused the Yankees to chase in the 9th inning, which it was 2-1 really throughout the game until the 8th inning. And then in the 8th inning, the Yankees relief pitching completely fell apart. And they have to figure out what this relief pitching is and what this bullpen is all about. Because if they don't figure this out, if they move forward into the playoffs, they're going to have problems against the Rays. They're going to have problems against the Houston Astros, teams that absolutely have played very, very well. Both teams have very good bullpens.
Yeah, the creativity of the bullpen is going to be very key because the Yankees are not normally built like this. The Yankees were the more traditional type bullpen. You had Zach Britton come out in the 8th inning. You had Aroldis Chapman as a closer, and now all of a sudden both those guys have had their woes. So all of a sudden now they got to be more creative with it. We've seen guys like Loaizaga play well in certain roles. Chad Green stepped up in certain roles this year. And even some of the starters out of the bullpen, too. A lot of these Yankee starters that have taken over in the second half of the season have relief pitching experience, too. Cortez, Luis Heel, or somebody like that. Even Jordan Montgomery has a little playoff experience in the bullpen, too. So something like that is something that could be an X factor when it comes to strategy against other managers that are pretty experienced. Dusty Baker, very experienced manager with the Astros. Kevin Cash, obviously, with the Rays and the creativity of his bullpen, too. And the Yankees at least have a little bit of an edge when it comes to the wild card teams because Aaron Boone's a little more experienced than their managers. Cora's probably about the same, but the creativity of the bullpen, can he make that next step in order to be able to do that with the starting pitching, too? Because Luis Severino's not a guy you can necessarily trust for length anymore. And outside of Gerrit Cole, there's really not a lot of guys you could trust for length. Even Montgomery, who's pitched well, still wasn't really a length guy. Tyone throughout his career is not really a length guy. They're more of, they're going to get the outs, they're going to get the key outs in battle more than anything else.
Well, the Yankees have an opportunity. Jordan Montgomery has an opportunity to get them into the playoffs, winning today. So hopefully the Yankees can get that wild card, that number 1 wild card spot, so they have that wild card game in Yankee Stadium.